Why was she always the one left out of the fight? The thought had been sitting in the back of Evelyn Jones's mind all morning, heavy as the desert heat, as she stood alone outside the Combs tent with a paper cup cooling between her hands. She'd been up since 0300, unable to sleep. Some people swore they could feel when a mission was brewing. Evelyn didn't just feel it, she lived in it, and she hated the knowing, because knowing didn't mean she'd be invited in. The Afghan sunrise bled slowly over the jagged mountains, flooding the sky with molten gold. Dust from the night winds still clung to the air, coating everything in a pale film. From this spot, it could almost look peaceful. Almost. She took a sip of her tea, lukewarm, bitter. She'd been holding it. So long the warmth had gone the way of most things out here. Gone before you realized you'd lost it. At 23, Evelyn was a curiosity on base. Born in Manchester, raised there until her family moved to the U.S. When she was 16, she carried a faint trace of her English accent that made her stand out in the mess hall. But what truly set her apart wasn't where she came from. It was how she reacted to the war around her. She didn't hide the way her throat tightened when civilian casualties came over the wire. She didn't blink away the sting in her eyes when she heard a medevac bird lifting off with one of their own. And in a place where the unspoken rule was feel nothing, show nothing, Evelyn wore her heart where everyone could see it. Not everyone was cruel about it. The nickname, Tears, had started in jest. Not a knife, more a shrug. A soft ribbing for someone they thought wasn't built for the hard stuff. And maybe, she thought, they believed it was true. At 5'4" and barely 125 pounds. She didn't look like the kind of soldier you sent into a fight. But appearances could lie. She was in the top 5% in marksmanship on base. Her artillery coordination skills were so sharp she could compute firing solutions in her head faster than some with a computer. She spoke 3 languages, had memorized the jagged puzzle of the Afghan terrain like it was a second home, and could read a tactical map with the instinct of someone born to it. None of it mattered when the assignments came down. At 0530, she walked into the briefing tent. The air inside buzzed with that pre-mission hum. The subtle shifting of weight, the faint scent of gun oil, the way voices dropped as the CO stepped forward. Maps covered the tables and walls, red zones for Taliban strongholds, blue for planned routes. Major Derek Harrison stood at the front, his face all weathered lines and unshakable calm. He didn't waste words. Today's reconnaissance mission is codenamed Desert Wind. Intelligence indicates high-value targets in Sector 12. This is a joint op with SEAL Team 7. I need precision and full situational awareness. Evelyn already knew where this was going. She opened her notebook anyway. Rodriguez, Lead Recon, Thompson, Overwatch, Williams Point Comes, names. Philbier, each one belonging to someone who trained, bled, and sweated alongside the others. Then, as if reading from a page he'd always known would be there, Jones, Base Communications Coordination, monitor all radio traffic, and maintain situation reports. Her pen didn't move. She just nodded once. A polite mask over the sting. She'd be behind a console again, relaying messages, logging transmissions. The room around her lit with quiet grins and gear checks. A shared rhythm she was never part of. As they dispersed, the low murmur of voices carried across the tent. She wasn't trying to listen, but the words came anyway. Honestly, I'm glad Jones isn't coming with us, Sergeant Martinez said under his breath. Last thing we need in a firefight is someone breaking down when it gets intense. Rodriguez's reply was quieter, but it still carried. She's solid with the technical stuff. But combat's different. You need people who can compartmentalize. She feels everything too much. Evelyn kept her eyes on the papers in front of her. She'd heard it all before. Too emotional, too reactive, a liability waiting to happen. The irony was, she agreed with part of it. In combat, emotion could get. You killed. But what they didn't see was the way it drove her to be more ready, to never accept good enough when lives depended on it. When the recon team prepped to roll out, she buried herself in Sector 12's maps. She traced every contour, every fold of ground, every line that could be cover or could be death. She rehearsed artillery calls in her head, visualized approach routes and fallback positions. No one asked her to, but preparation was the one thing she could control. At 1400, the convoy rolled. Out into the heat shimmer, Evelyn stood outside the Cum's tent and watched the vehicles become dust clouds. Then she settled into her seat at the console. It would be quiet. It was always quiet. Until it wasn't 1537 hours, Rodriguez's voice slammed through the static, the sound of automatic gunfire tearing through the background. Base, this is Desert Wind Alpha, taking heavy fire. Repeat, under attack in Sector 12 Alpha. Evelyn's pen dropped. She leaned over the console, fingers flying across the board to boost the signal. Every face in the room turned toward the speakers. Multiple hostiles, 15, maybe 20 Taliban. They were waiting for us, ambush. The report cracked between the thump of RPGs. 2 men down, 1 critical. Requesting immediate extraction and close air support. Major Harrison's voice came sharp from the command center. Extraction team is 20 minutes out. Can. You hold? Negative. Position compromised. Moving to secondary extraction point. The wounded can't move fast. We need artillery support to clear our 6. No one told her to move. No one even looked at her. But Evelyn's mind was already doing the math, angles, distances, fire zones, while her hands switched to encrypted channels. Desert Wind. This is base comes. I need your exact grid. She said into the mic. There was a pause. Who is this? Rodriguez's voice was taut with confusion. This is Jones. Grid reference. Now. He rattled it off between bursts of fire. Jones, you're not certified for... I've got it. She cut in, entering the numbers before he'd finished. Harrison's voice rose in the background, calling for the certified forward observer. She ignored it. Then Rodriguez added something that made her stomach drop. Base. SEAL Team 7 is also in Sector 12. Not responding to calls. Last known position was less than 2 clicks from us. The room went still. For the next 10 minutes, Evelyn's headset filled with the chaos of 2 separate battles. Artillery coordination for Rodriguez's team. Failed hails to the SEALs. The sound of voices growing more strained with each exchange. Then at 15:52, a faint, static-choked voice. Any station. This is SEAL Team 7. Down to 2 effectives, multiple wounded. Surrounded. Request immediate assistance. She saw it in her mind before she even looked at the map. 3 miles of hostile ground. No viable extraction route. Helicopters too far out. Artillery useless this close to friendlies. Someone would have to reach them, and someone would have to do it now. She felt the shift in the room before she realized it. The eyes turning her way. No one said a word, but the air seemed to hold the thought. Evelyn stood, reached for a vest, and began strapping in. Williams's voice cut the silence. What are you doing? Going to get them? You can't leave your post, he said, stepping toward her. You're not authorized for field ops. Harrison assigned you here. They've got 15 minutes before they're overrun, she said, locking her rifle into place. Air support is 20 out. Artillery can't help. Someone has to move now, and that someone isn't you. His voice rose. You've never seen live combat. Her eyes met his. I know the terrain better than anyone here. I can get there in 30 minutes. She slung her pack over her shoulder. What do I tell Harrison? He called after her as she stepped toward the door. She didn't look back. Tell him I went to bring our people home. The air outside was hotter than the breath in her lungs. The sky white with glare. She started running, and every step carried her deeper into the unknown. What did 3 miles of hostile ground feel like when you were the only one running toward the gunfire? Evelyn found out within minutes. The sun was merciless overhead, a white disk in a washed-out sky. The air shimmered in waves off the rock, the heat pulling moisture from her skin faster than she could breathe. Her boots struck the dry soil in a steady, measured rhythm, not sprinting, not strolling, the kind of pace you use when you know you have to arrive with something left to give. She moved like she was on a wire, balanced between speed and stealth. Every rise in the ground was a chance to be silhouetted. Every hollow a place someone could be waiting. She chose her path like a chess player. 3 moves ahead, a jagged outcropping for cover, a gully that ran parallel to her heading, a narrow defile where shadows clung even in the afternoon glare. From a distance, the hills looked empty, but Evelyn had lived here long enough to know that empty meant nothing. The Taliban could blend into rock and dust until they were a whisper away. A low, gusty breath of wind shifted the dust across the plain. She froze. Her eye swept the ridge to her right. Nothing moved but her gut, that part of her training no manual had given her, said go left. She cut her angle, dropping into the shelter of a dry creek bed. 5 minutes later, the first sounds reached her. Faint at first, then sharper. The chatter of M4 South, the distinct staccato pop, 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 the heavier, slower bark of a K-47's answering back, then the hollow hump of an RPG somewhere ahead. The sound rolling over the rocks. They were still alive and still in the fight. She brought the mic closer to her mouth, kept her voice low. SEAL Team 7, this is base communications. 1 click from your position, approaching from the southeast. What's your status? The reply was immediate, the voice tense but steady. Base comms, this is Chief Petty Officer Marcus Chun. We're in a ravine, steep walls on 3 sides. Enemy's got the high ground advantage. Low on ammo. 2 of my men need immediate evac. Copy, Chief. I'm carrying medical supplies. I can coordinate artillery. Hold your position. I'm coming to you. There was a pause, enough to carry surprise even through the static. Did you just say you're coming to us? Are you part of the extraction team? Negative. Chief, she said, sidestepping a narrow crevice and keeping low. Just someone who refuses to let good people die on a sunny day. The last 500 meters were the hardest. The ground rose and broke into jagged shelves of rock, each one forcing her into narrow channels where her movement was predictable. The air was thick with noise now. Rifles trading bursts, shouted commands in Pashto from positions she couldn't see, and a thin, high hum of incoming rounds snapping somewhere above. She crested a low ridge and the battlefield opened below her. It was worse than she'd imagined. The ravine was a long, narrow cut in the earth, maybe 20 meters across. At the bottom, the SEALs were bunched behind a burned-out vehicle and scattered boulders, their positions barely enough to keep the incoming fire from chewing them apart. 2 men lay motionless, one on his back, his gear dark with blood at the chest, another curled on his side, unmoving even when a round cracked into the rock above him on the ridges above. The Taliban had the perfect kill zone, high ground on 3 sides. Muzzle flashes winked from behind rocks, shifting positions to keep the Americans pinned. She counted 12, maybe more, moving with the confidence of fighters who knew the clock was on their side. If she went straight in, she'd be cut down before she reached them. If she waited, they'd be overrun. Her eyes scanned the terrain again, fast, ruthless. And there, along the eastern edge, was the thing most people wouldn't have noticed. The ravine had been carved by seasonal flooding. A drainage channel snaked down into it, narrow and choked with loose stone. From up top, it looked impassable. But she knew the angles. The slope bent just enough to hide movement from most positions. She keyed her radio, switching to the artillery coordination channel. Fire Direction Center. This is Forward Observer Jones. I have eyes on 12 to 15 enemy fighters engaging friendlies. Need high explosive, proximity fuse. Targeting northern ridgeline. Danger close. Friendlies 300 meters south of target. The reply came back sharp. Jones? You're not certified as a forward observer. We have you logged at base communications. FDC. Another voice broke in. Chun's. Chief Petty Officer Chun, authorizing Jones as our foe. We need that fire mission now. A pause. Roger. Chief. Jones. Send it. Her eyes flicked back to the high ground. Fire mission grid 41RQ 1-4-5-6-7-8-9-0-1-2. Enemy in the open, 3 rounds, fire for effect. Shot out. Shot out. She echoed. She switched back to Chun. 30 seconds to impact when they hit. I'm moving down the eastern drainage channel to you. Negative. Base comes. Chen said immediately. That approach is covered by enemy fire. You'll be walking into a kill zone. Chief, she said, eyes locked on the slope. Trust me, they can't see this path from their current positions. The first round hit like the earth itself was striking back. A column of dust and rock shot skyward, the ridge erupting in a roar. The second and third came in quick succession, shaking the air in her chest. For a few precious seconds, enemy fire slackened as fighters scrambled for cover. She didn't waste them. She dropped to her stomach and slid into the drainage channel. Boots and elbows finding holes in the loose stone. Every few meters. The slope angled just enough to shield her from sight. She moved fast but careful. Too fast and she'd lose her footing. Too slow and she'd lose her window. Halfway down. A round cracked into the rock just above her head. The concussion of stone chips stung her neck. They'd spotted movement, maybe caught a glimpse through a gap in the angle. She flattened, breathing hard, then pushed on, using every bend in the channel to mask herself. At the bottom, she rolled into the ravine beside the seals. Chun's head whipped around. I'll be damned. You actually made it. Status of the wounded? She asked, already shrugging her pack off. Rodriguez took an AK round to the chest. Armor held. But he's out of it. Thompson caught shrapnel in the leg and abdomen. He's critical. She was beside Thompson in 2 seconds, cutting away fabric, applying pressure, checking his airway. The smell of dust and cordite hung in the air, sharp and dry. The man's skin was pale under the grime, his breathing shallow. Chung crouched beside her. Even if we get them patched, we're surrounded. Extraction still 15 out. She jerked her chin toward the channel she'd come through. That leads to better cover, open fields of fire, and a landing zone for the bird. 500 meters south. He looked at the slope. We can't carry 2 wounded like that under fire. We're not going up, she said. We're going through. She keyed her mic. FDC. Standby for continuous suppression fire. We're moving the wounded. The ground above them erupted again as another volley came in. The air shaking with the sound. Dust rained down in thin sheets. Evelyn kept her head low, her mind already shifting to the next problem. How to move 2 men, keep them alive, and keep the rest of the team from being wiped out before the helicopter even had a chance to land. How far could one body carry another when the world was trying to kill them both? Evelyn didn't ask herself that question. She didn't have the time to. She just moved. The moment the last artillery round slammed into the ridge above, she hooked. Her arms under Thompson's shoulders and heaved. The man was dead weight, 180 pounds of muscle, gear, and limp resistance. She got him upright, then shifted his weight onto her shoulders in a modified fireman's carry, locking her right arm around his legs while keeping her left free for balance. The heat hit her in waves as she stepped into the drainage channel, each movement pulling against the screaming muscles in her lower back. Her boots scraped over loose stone, finding traction only by instinct. Behind her, Chun and the other SEAL hauled Rodriguez between them, rifles clattering against rocks as they half-carried, half-dragged him toward the same path Evelyn had taken. Minutes earlier, the artillery was still walking its way along the ridgeline, each impact rolling down into the ravine like a clap of thunder. But she knew the suppression wouldn't last forever. The Taliban fighters were disciplined enough to recover fast, and when they did, they'd adjust fire toward the narrow chute where the Americans were now retreating. She focused on her breathing, short, controlled bursts. Every few steps she'd glance ahead, checking for the next bend in the channel, the next pocket of shadow that might hide them for 2 seconds longer. Halfway to the fallback position, the first warning came, a single crack overhead. The distinct sound of a high-velocity round slicing the air just above her. A sniper, somewhere upslope, had found a partial angle. She adjusted her line, hugging the right-hand wall of the channel so close her shoulder scraped stone. But the rock under her right boot betrayed her, crumbling, sliding, sending her lurching toward the exposed gap where the channel widened. She couldn't catch herself with her hands. Thompson's weight locked her in place, so she twisted hard at the waist, using momentum to slam them both into the sidewall. The impact was violent. Pain detonated along her ribs, hot and deep, making her vision white out for a second. She swallowed it. Pain could wait. Moving couldn't. When they finally spilled into the fallback position, a natural rock formation that offered overlapping fields of fire, her arms were trembling from the effort. She eased Thompson down, immediately checking his bandages. He was still breathing, but each rise of his chest was shallow. Position secure. She called over Combs, voice tight. Outstanding, Chun replied. His voice carried the strain of effort. We're moving Rodriguez now. 30 seconds out. Evelyn didn't waste the seconds. She reloaded, scanning the high ground above with her scope. She caught flashes of movement, fighters repositioning along the ridges, their rifles angling toward the drainage channel. They'd guessed the Americans' escape route, and if Chun's team was caught halfway up, it would be a slaughter. She keyed the mic again. FDC, shift suppression fire. Intercept enemy movement north and west of grid 41 RQ 1456. 10 rounds rapid. A burst of static. Copy shift. The first volley landed seconds later, chewing up rock and dust across the northern approach. The fighters ducked. But one, braver or dumber than the rest, leaned out to fire. Evelyn's reticle found him. The shot was instinctive, not conscious thought, and when his rifle clattered to the stone, she was already pivoting to the next target. Rounds began snapping into her position, throwing up shards of stone. One ricochet bit into her cheek, hot blood trickling down. She kept firing, and then the first bullet found her. It hit her left shoulder, the impact slamming through the ceramic plate and spinning her halfway around. Her rifle skidded across the rock. She sucked in air through her teeth, reached for it with her good arm, and sent another shot downrange. The second hit came seconds later, her right thigh. The shock tore through the muscle, buckling her leg. She dropped to one knee, but forced herself up again, her breathing ragged now. The third tore into her side, low and vicious. The armor slowed it, but didn't stop the deep, burning shock that radiated with every movement. The fourth was a graze, the round skimming the side of her head, heat and force knocking her sideways. Warm blood flooded down into her right eye, blurring her vision. Her world narrowed to the space between each heartbeat. The roar of battle faded into a dull hum. She could taste metal on her tongue, but she stayed on the trigger, every pull buying seconds for Chun's team to make it the last few meters. When they finally dropped into the fallback position, Rodriguez slumped between them. Chun swore out loud when he saw her. "You're hit. Get them ready for extraction." She cut him off, steady but breathless. "Bird's 3 minutes out," Chun said. "LZ's 200 meters south, but it's open terrain. We move without cover. We'll be chewed apart." "How much ammo do you have?" she asked. 60 rounds for the whole team. Not enough to fight our way there." Her eyes flicked to the ridges, then to the flat stretch of dust beyond. "FDC." She keyed the mic. I need a walking barrage from our current position to grid 41RQ1458. Continuous, danger close, we're moving with wounded. A pause. Jones, that's 200 meters of fire mission with friendlies on foot. Send it, she said. The first impacts landed ahead of them, raising walls of dust and stone. Evelyn rose, ignoring the way her leg screamed and her shoulder threatened to give out. I'll take Thompson, she told Chun. You get Rodriguez. You can barely stand. Watch me. She hauled Thompson up again, her body protesting. Every inch, her right arm locked around his legs, her left gripping his wrist across her shoulders. Every step forward was like lifting the whole world. The barrage advanced with them, each impact covering their movement, each gap a risk they had to gamble through. The ground trembled beneath their boots. Hot dust filled her lungs, and somewhere, behind it all, the fighters regrouped. She could hear their shouts, feel their intent chasing them down. Halfway to the LZ, a round hit close enough to spray her side with rock shards. She stumbled, her vision swimming, but she didn't stop. 2 minutes. Chun shouted over the noise. Her arms burned. Her legs felt carved from lead. Thompson's weight had become part of her. As if they were lashed together, the blood in her eye blurred the world into shapes and shadows. But the helicopter's thump was in the air now, faint but growing. What does 200 meters look like when every inch can kill you? To Evelyn, it was a tunnel of dust and heat, its walls made of gunfire. The walking barrage was still punching the earth ahead of them, but the Taliban had recovered enough to start firing. Through it, blind bursts meant to catch anything moving in the haze. Bullets cracked past her ears, some so close she could feel the hot slip of air they left behind. She kept her head low, her boots pounding the dirt in rhythm with the distant thunder of the helicopter's rotors. It was still out of sight, but she could feel it now, a deep vibration in the bones. Thompson's weight was crushing her spine. Every step jarred her wounds, sending lightning through her thigh, her shoulder, her side. Her breathing was ragged and shallow. The world was narrowing to a series of small goals. Make the next 10 meters, then the next. Behind her, Chun and the others dragged Rodriguez, their movements jerky, uneven. One of the SEALs stumbled under the strain and went down hard, but Chun yanked him back to his feet without breaking stride. They were close enough now that the LZ's flat, hard-packed earth was visible through the dust, and with it, the shape of the bird, a black hawk, blades already spinning, kicking up a cyclone of grit and debris. The pilot's voice came through. Oncoms, calm but urgent. You've got 90 seconds before we lift. Hostile movement closing in from your north and west. Make it fast. 90 seconds. It might as well have been 9 hours. Evelyn's left knee buckled. She went down. Hard on one side, Thompson hitting the ground with her. The impact tore the air from her lungs. She tasted blood. Jones. Chen's voice cut through the chaos. I've got him, she said, forcing herself upright. Her vision blurred at the edges, but she locked her grip around Thompson again. Then the barrage ended. The silence after the last explosion was deafening and deadly. The moment the artillery stopped, enemy fire doubled. They had clear lines now, and the dust was already settling. Rounds started striking closer. One slammed into the dirt inches from her boot, spraying grit into her face. She didn't stop moving. The Black Hawk's side door gunners opened up, their miniguns chewing the air with a steady stream of tracers. Fighters on the ridge ducked, but others kept coming, scrambling down the slopes, in a reckless rush to close the distance before the Americans could lift off. Chen's voice was sharp in her ear. We're exposed, move! They broke into a staggered run. Evelyn's body screamed in protest, but the thump of the rotors was louder now, the promise of safety just ahead. The first SEALs reached the helicopter and heaved Rodriguez aboard. The medics inside went to work. Immediately, shouting vitals over the noise, Chun turned back for Evelyn, but she waved him on, her face set.
Get in.
I'm right behind you. She was lying. She knew she was the last one who should board first. By the time she reached the edge of the LZ, Chun was in the bird, leaning out with an arm extended toward her. She stopped short, lowering Thompson to the ground beside the open door. Go, she told him. You're coming too. He shouted back. She shook her head, turning toward the ridge. Not until you're all aboard. The gunner's fire swept the slope again, but the fighters were closing the gap fast. One appeared through the thinning dust, rifle raised, Evelyn's. M4 snapped up, her shot dropping him before he could fire. Another came into view. Then another. She kept firing, each squeeze of the trigger, feeling like it was coming from somewhere far away. Jones. Now. Chun's voice was almost drowned by the rotor wash. She glanced back. The bird was full. All the wounded inside, every man accounted for. She'd bought them the seconds they needed. She stepped toward the open door, but her right leg gave out entirely. The ground tilted under her, and she hit the dirt hard. Chen was out of the bird in 2 strides, hauling her up under one arm. She tried to protest, but the words wouldn't come. Her throat was dry, her lips sticky with blood. They staggered the last steps together, Chun half lifting her into the cabin. The door slammed shut, and the Black Hawk surged upward, banking hard away from the kill. Soon, the LZ fell away beneath them, a shrinking patch of earth surrounded by jagged ridges, now swarming with enemy fighters too late to stop the escape. Evelyn leaned back against the cool metal of the cabin wall, every muscle trembling. The medics were already on Thompson, one of them shouting, "We've got a pulse." Over the din, Chun crouched beside her, his face streaked with dust and sweat. "You're out of your damn mind," he said, but there was a flicker of something else in his eyes. Respect, gratitude. She managed a weak smile. "I didn't come this far to watch from a chair." Her head felt heavy now. The adrenaline that had carried her this far was ebbing, replaced by a cold that started in her hands and crept up her arms. She let her eyes close for just a moment. The last thing she heard before the darkness took her was the pilot's voice over the intercom. "Birds clear, all souls accounted for." How long could she stay awake if she kept telling herself not to close her eyes? Evelyn wasn't sure. The Black Hawk's interior was a storm of movement and noise. The rotors thundered overhead, the metal floor rattled under her boots, and the air reeked of fuel, gunpowder, and blood. The medics were working fast. One crouched over Thompson, cutting away the rest of his gear, hands moving in rapid, precise motions. Another was pressing gauze hard into the wound in Evelyn's side, shouting something she couldn't quite hear over the pounding in her ears. Her head swam. The rhythm of her heartbeat felt wrong, uneven, sometimes too fast, sometimes distant and slow. She blinked hard, but the edges of her vision kept darkening, as if someone was dimming the lights a little more every second. "Stay with me, Jones." The medic's voice finally cut through. "Look at me. Don't you drift off." She tried to focus on his face, but saw 2 of him. Her gaze slid to Thompson instead. He was pale as the canvas under him, his eyes closed, an oxygen mask fogging with each shallow breath. One medic was bagging air into his lungs, another pushing an 4-line into his arm. She wanted to ask if he'd make it. The words wouldn't come. Her mind began slipping, not into sleep, but into places she didn't mean to go. A street in Manchester. She was 7 years old, holding her father's hand, watching Royal Marines march past in a parade. She remembered the sound of the boots on the road, the way her father's grip had tightened. "They don't flinch, Evie. Remember that." A kitchen in Arizona, her mother's voice softer than she'd ever hear it. Again, "You can't carry everyone. Love, you'll break yourself." Becomes tent back at base. Her name scratched in pencil on the duty roster. The unspoken reminder she wasn't trusted outside the wire. The smell of cordite snapped her back to the present. The medic was saying something to Chun, who was now crouched in front of her. She caught fragments, through and through on the thigh. Possible hairline fracture. Plate stopped the shoulder hit, but internal bleed. Chun's eyes locked with hers. You hear me, Jones? You're gonna make it. She almost laughed, not because she thought he was lying, but because she remembered the first time she'd seen him, his clean, clipped orders, his absolute certainty about who could do what. Back then, he wouldn't have bet on her for a milk run. Now he was telling her she'd make it. Her side spasmed suddenly, and she sucked in air through her teeth. The medic pressed harder, and white heat tore through her vision. She bit back a sound and focused on the vibration of the deck beneath her, counting each shudder as the helicopter cut through the air. ETA, 4 minutes. The crew chief shouted from the door. 4 minutes. She could do 4 minutes. She'd done worse, but the memories kept bleeding through. She saw the ridgeline again, the muzzle flashes winking like stars in daylight. She saw Rodriguez's slack face, the color draining from his lips. She saw Thompson's weight across her shoulders, the way his head had lolled with each step, and she saw something else. The look on the faces of the men when she dropped into their position. Surprise, yes, but also relief. The kind that came when you realized someone had decided you were worth dying for. She held on to that thought like a handhold. The helicopter pitched slightly, banking toward the base. Through the open side door, she caught glimpses of the airfield, the bright panels of the landing zone, the blur of figures running toward it. The bird touched down hard. The medics moved instantly, sliding Thompson onto a stretcher, securing him with straps before sprinting. Toward the waiting trauma team, another medic and Chun hauled Evelyn up between them. The glare outside was blinding after the dim interior. Heat slammed into her again, mixing with the smell of jet fuel and dust. The noise was of wall rotors, shouts, the whine of engines. Every step toward the medical tent felt like the last one she could take. Her thigh threatened to buckle, her side burned. Her shoulder throbbed in time with her pulse. Inside the tent, cool air hit her face, smelling faintly of antiseptic. White light flooded everything. Hands she didn't recognize were on her, cutting away gear, peeling back blood-soaked fabric. Voices overlapped in clipped medical jargon. BP is dropping. Get a line in. Prep for transfusion. They slid her onto a table. A mask went over her face. Oxygen hissed in her ears. A voice above her. Firm. Professional. We've got you, soldier. You're safe. She wanted to believe it. But the last thing she saw, before the anesthetic pulled her under, was the blur of the tent ceiling and the thought, safe doesn't always mean done. The first thing she noticed was the beeping. Steady, slow, almost lulling. Somewhere to her right, a soft hiss matched it, mechanical and alive at the same time. She didn't open her eyes right away. The air was cool, and the surface beneath her felt too still to be anywhere near a battlefield. The smell was the giveaway. Antiseptic, sterile, hospital. When she finally let her eyelids crack open, the light was filtered, not harsh, white canvas overhead. A faint shadow swaying along the wall, where someone passed by outside. You're up, a voice said quietly. She turned her head, the movement slow. Dragging her gaze toward the sound, Chum sat in a folding chair beside her bed. His uniform was clean now, but the skin around his eyes told another story. Too many hours. Without rest. How long? Her voice was a rasp, her throat dry. 36 hours since we pulled you out, he said. Surgery took 6. You've been out cold since. Her body felt heavy, distant. She shifted slightly, and pain bloomed in several places at once. Her thigh, her side, her shoulder. She caught her breath and let it go in a slow, measured exhale. And them? She asked. She didn't need to specify. Chun's gaze held hers. Rodriguez is stable. Thompson's still in critical, but the surgeons think he's got a shot. You bought him that shot. She closed her eyes again, but this time not from pain. Relief was a strange weight. It didn't lift you. It just settled in a different place inside you. When she opened them again, Chun was leaning forward, forearms on his knees. "I'm not sure I've ever seen anything like that," he said. "What you did out there? Hell, we wouldn't be sitting here if you hadn't shown up." She gave a half shrug, wincing. "You'd have done the same." He didn't answer right away then. "Maybe. But you weren't even supposed to be there. You had no obligation. To us, that makes it different." Her mind drifted to the moment she'd left Tecum's tent. The decision so quick, it hadn't felt like one at all. No deliberation, no permission, just motion. She swallowed against the dryness in her throat. Sometimes you don't wait to be asked. Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable. Outside, she could hear distant helicopter rotors, the hum of a generator, the muted calls of medics moving from tent to tent. Chun stood finally, pulling something from his pocket. "The CO wants to talk to you when you're stronger, but for now," he set the object on the table beside her bed. Her Cum's headset, cleaned, repaired, the thin scratches on its surface still visible. "Figured you'd want that back," he said. She nodded once, watching him leave. For a while, she listened to the hospital's rhythm. Footsteps, voices, the occasional metallic clink of equipment. Then she let herself drift, but the images from the ridge didn't fade. She saw the dust hanging in the air, the flashes of muzzle fire, the way Thompson's weight had felt, not just physical, but symbolic. Every pound of him was a promise she'd made, unspoken but binding. At some point, a nurse came to check her vitals. She was young, probably barely out of training, but her hands were steady. Evelyn asked for water, and the nurse helped her sip it slowly, warning her not to push too much at once. When the nurse left, Evelyn let her head sink back into the pillow. The water tasted like nothing, but it felt like the first real thing she'd had in days. Later, maybe hours, maybe only minutes, Chun returned, this time with another figure in tow, an older man, square-jawed, wearing the insignia of a commanding officer. "Sergeant Jones," the CO said, stepping to her bedside. "You've caused quite a stir." "Sorry to complicate the roster, sir," she said, her voice low but even. He studied her for a moment, then shook his head slightly. "I've read the after-action report twice. Still not sure how you managed it, but I do know this. You acted without orders, and in most cases that's a problem. This time, it saved lives. Good people are breathing. Because you didn't wait." She didn't know how to respond to that. Praise felt out of place here. Surrounded by the sound of people fighting for their lives, the CO seemed to read that in her face. "Rest. We'll debrief when you're ready." He gave Chun a nod and left as quickly as he'd come. When it was quiet again, Chun spoke. "You." "No. I thought I understood grit. I've seen it in combat, seen it in training. But watching you, it wasn't just grit. It was something else." "What?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Choice," he said. "You chose to take our fight as your own. That's different than being ordered into it." She didn't reply, but in the stillness that followed, she thought about his words, about choice, and about the weight of carrying someone else's life in your arms. That night, when the tent was dim and the sounds outside had quieted, she lay awake for a long time. She thought of Thompson in the ICU, of Rodriguez sleeping somewhere down the row, of Chun leaning forward in that chair, and she thought of something her father had said when she was small, the words floating back. "Through decades, dignity doesn't always speak, Evya. Sometimes it just acts." She closed her eyes. The pain was still there, sharp and insistent, but it felt different now, like proof. She hated the crutches. They were aluminum, light enough to swing, but they squeaked against the hospital floor no matter how she moved. The sound followed her like an unwanted shadow as she shuffled between the rehab area and her cot. 3 weeks had passed since the ridge. Her thigh wound had closed, but the muscle was still weak, stubbornly refusing to do what her mind ordered. Her side and shoulder still ached in cold mornings and humid afternoons. The physical pain was manageable. It was the stillness she couldn't stand. The rehab tent was a small space sectioned off from the main ward, with a handful of exercise mats, resistance bands, and free weights that had probably seen more. Dustin Hughes, a young physiotherapist from North Carolina, worked with her every morning, keeping the movements slow and deliberate. "Don't try to win a race you're not ready to run," he'd say as she forced her leg to lift, step, and hold its own weight. She didn't argue, not out loud, but inside, she was already thinking about the next fight. The next chance to prove she wasn't just a desk assignment who'd gotten lucky once. Still, there were moments when her resolve wavered. Some nights, she'd wake in the dim quiet of the ward, the beeping monitors like distant radar pings, and wonder if she'd done the right thing. The fight on the ridge replayed in her mind, not the moments she'd been strong, but the ones where she'd almost gone down. She wondered how close it had really been to all of them dying there. It was on one of those nights that Chun appeared again. He came without warning, slipping into the chair by her bed, the same way he had when she'd first woken after surgery. "Thompson's awake," he said. She pushed herself up on one elbow. "When?" "Yesterday," Chun said. "They're keeping him under watch, but he's talking." First thing he asked was who carried him out. She felt heat rise in her chest, though it wasn't from the wounds. "What did you tell him?" "The truth," Chun said. "And now he wants to see you." It wasn't until the next afternoon that she made her way to Thompson's bed. He was propped up, pale but grinning faintly when she stepped in. "Ma'am," he said, voice rough. "You have the worst bedside manner I've ever experienced. You didn't even tell me you were my taxi service." She managed to smile. "Didn't think you'd remember the trip." "I don't," he admitted. "But Chun does. He told me. You carried me like I was a bag of groceries." "Bag of bricks, more like," she said. The smile faded into something quieter. "I wouldn't be here without you. I mean that." She looked at him for a moment, then nodded once. "We don't leave people behind. Not when there's still a chance." A shadow of understanding passed between them, not something either of them needed to explain. Back in the rehab tent, the exercises started to feel different. Not easier, exactly, but less like punishment. Each step, each lift of her leg, had a purpose now beyond herself. By the 4th week, she'd shed the crutches for a cane. By the 5th, she could walk unaided, though every few steps a hidden ache reminded her of the bullet that had been there. It was around then that the decision came. The CO called her in, not to the hospital tent this time, but to his office at the far edge of the compound. The air inside was cool, a small fan pushing the heat toward the corners. "You're being cleared for limited duty," he said, without preamble. "Medical's recommending comms or operations center work until you've built full strength. That'll take another month, maybe more." She studied his face. "And the alternative?" "Returning to the field before you're at 100%, he said. "Not something I'd advise, but you've earned the right to choose." She didn't answer immediately. The truth was, she didn't know which part of her was louder, the one that craved the fight or the one that understood the cost. That night, she walked the perimeter of the base slowly, her hands in her pockets. The stars were sharp overhead, the air cool against her skin. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the wire, she could hear faint movement, wind through the rocks, maybe something more. When she returned to the ward, Chen was waiting, leaning against her cot. "SEALs are shipping out tomorrow," he said. "Different EO, but before we go, the guys want to see you." She frowned. "All of them?" "All of them," he confirmed. They met in the rec area, a wide tent with battered chairs and a single long table. The men were there already. Rodriguez leaning on a crutch, Thompson in a wheelchair. The moment she stepped in, the noise stopped. Then Rodriguez grinned. "Jones," he said, "about time you showed up. We were starting to think you were avoiding us." She shook her head, smiling faintly. "Wouldn't dream of it." They cleared a space at the table for her. Stories started spilling, half true. half-exaggerated retellings of the Ridge fight. In their version, she was bigger, faster, somehow immune to bullets until the last 5 minutes. She didn't correct them when the laughter faded. Chun lifted a small wooden box from under the table. He set it in front of her. "This isn't official," he said, "but it's from us." Inside was a single challenge coin, worn smooth on the edges, the seal insignia engraved in the center. Around it, in small, neat letters, was one phrase. "She carried us." Her throat tightened. "I can't." "You can," Chun said, his voice steady. "You didn't have to be there. But you were. That's what this means." She closed the box carefully, feeling the weight of it in her hands. Later, when she lay in her cot, the coin still in reach on the table beside her, she realized she'd made her choice without saying it out loud. Whether she went back into the field or not, she wasn't done. Not with them, not with herself. It was still early when she left the hospital tent. The sun was low over the eastern ridge, the air not yet baked by the heat that would come later. The compound was just waking, a forklift humming in the motor pool, a few soldiers moving between the chow hall and their posts. Evelyn walked without the cane now. The limp was still there if you looked closely, but she didn't bother to hide it. Every step was deliberate, steady, as if she was reminding herself that the ground was solid. Under her, her duffel was light. Most of her gear had been ruined on the ridge, torn, burned, or soaked through. What remained was what mattered. The Cum's headset, now tucked in the side pocket, and the small wooden box from the seals. She hadn't opened it since the night they gave it to her. The transport flight wasn't for another hour, so she wandered to the edge of the perimeter. From here, the mountains stretched away in jagged layers, fading into haze. Somewhere beyond them was the ridge, invisible in the morning light, but still etched into her memory in exact detail. She let herself stand there a while, listening. No rotors, no artillery, no rifle cracks, just wind, carrying the faint scent of dust and stone. It would have been easy to tell herself the mission was over, that the war, or at least her part in it, was something she could fold up neatly and pack away. But she knew better. You didn't carry people out of fire and then set that weight down just because you crossed a safe line. Some things stayed with you, not as burdens, but as proof. She thought of Rodriguez's grin in the wreck tent, of Thompson's quiet gratitude, of Chun's steady voice in the worst minutes of the fight. She thought of her father's old words, spoken decades ago, but somehow still sharp, as if she'd just heard them. "I don't flinch. Evie, remember that." Behind her, a Humvee rolled past, its tires crunching over gravel. She didn't turn. Her orders had been clear. Return to the States for medical review, then take 60 days leave. Most people would have welcomed it, but she wasn't sure where to put herself in the idea of leave. She'd been living forward for so long. Every hour pointed at the next problem to solve, the next mission to complete. Now, there was just space. The sound of boots on gravel broke her thoughts. She glanced over her shoulder to see Chun walking toward her. He was in full gear, helmet clipped to his pack, rifle slung casually but ready. "Thought you'd already left," he said. "Flight's in an hour," she replied. He came to stand beside her. Looking out over the mountains, for a moment, neither of them spoke. "SEALs head out again tomorrow," he said finally. She nodded, keeping her eyes on the horizon. "Different ridge? Same story?" "Maybe," he said, "but not the same without you." She didn't answer, and he didn't push it. That was one thing she respected about him. He knew when to leave a silence in place. After a moment, he pulled something from his vest pocket and held it out, a photo, slightly bent at the corners. It was the 5 of them, Chun, Rodriguez, Thompson, and 2 others from the team, standing in front of a Humvee, dusty and grinning. In the background, she could just make out the edge of the ridgeline they'd fought on. "Figured you should have a copy," he said. She took it, running her thumb over the image. The smiles were real, the kind you couldn't fake after days in the field. She slipped it into her duffel, right next to the wooden box, when the loudspeaker finally called for her transport. She and Chun walked back toward the airstrip together. The C-130 sat with its rear ramp down, engines already running. The air was thick with exhaust and the metallic tang of fuel. At the base of the ramp, she turned to him. "Take care of them," she said. "Always," he replied. "And you? Try not to get shot 4 times on your next vacation." She smirked faintly. "No promises." They shook hands firm, then she stepped up the ramp. The interior of the aircraft was a cavern of noise and vibration. She found a seat along the side, strapped in, and let her eyes close for a moment as the crew moved around her. The takeoff was rough, the big transport shuddering as it lifted into the air. She kept her gaze out the small porthole window, watching the mountains drop away beneath them. The light caught the ridges just right, casting shadows into the valleys, and for a moment she could almost see the path she'd taken that day. The drainage channel, the fallback position, the flat stretch of the LZ. Her side ached faintly, but she didn't mind. Some pain was worth keeping. Hours later, when the C-130 leveled off and the noise became background, she reached into her duffel and pulled out the wooden box. She turned it over once in her hands before opening it. The coin lay inside, simple and unchanging. The words, "She carried us." Catching the light, she closed her fingers around it, the metal warm from her palm. She thought of every step that had brought her here, the choice to leave the Cums tent, the weight of Thompson over her shoulders, the steady roar of the helicopter as the ridge fell away. She didn't need to tell anyone what it meant. She didn't need to say anything at all, because some truths didn't live in speeches or medals. They lived in the silent moments, in the spaces where you acted before anyone asked, and in the way you carried not just people, but the proof of what you were willing to stand for. The engines droned on. The mountains faded into clouds, and somewhere inside her she knew this wasn't the end of anything, just a pause. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.